What's going on? Mitch Wayne's World. Um, yeah, I don't have a lot of time again, so we're just about to do another thing. Watch a little video, talk about it. I got like 25 minutes, so that means I can watch like a 10-minute video because I can't be quiet. Let's watch this. Gen Z quietly gave up and nobody noticed. To all my Zoomers out there, have you given up? Is it over? Or is it just getting started?
So I went on Reddit the other day and
Oh, right. Did you? I'm sorry. That's so.
I saw a thread that was quite interesting. The title was, "What's it like being in your 20s in the UK these days?"
Right.
And even if you're not in the UK or 20s, I bet you'll be able to relate to the top answer. Let me read it out for you.
Dude, the angle is crazy. If you didn't know what it's like being 20 in the US these days, it can be a little bit intense.
What's the point? I'm renting and I would love to buy a house, but what's the point?
Right.
I'll likely never pay it off. I'm paying loads into a pension, but what's the point? I'm going to be working until I die.
The violin
I'd like to
music.
see a doctor about some minor ailments, but what's the point? There's never any appointments anyway. If you couldn't tell, this is going to be a video that is brimming with optimism. But I think there's an important message to be made here. If you've clicked on this,
This
I'm
guy's
going
got
to
good
assume
energy.
that to at least some degree you can relate to the sentiment that this user has posted.
Some people just have a relaxed smile at all times, and this guy seems like he
In
does.
fact, I came across a study that found that over half of young people agree with the statement that humanity is doomed.
Oh my
And
God.
if I wanted to convince you otherwise, I could tell you that child mortality has dropped by half in the last 20 years, or any other bunch of random stats. But I
Yeah.
don't think they actually convey anything helpful for most of us.
Yeah.
I want you to stick with me for the next few minutes because I think we can actually go in a more useful direction.
I'm sticking.
And on the off chance that
I'm sticking
the
with
random
you,
Reddit
baby.
user Froyo Flashy 6048 is watching this one's for you, bro. So
We're here
the
for you,
sentiment
Froyo
expressed
Flashy.
in that comment is hardly something uncommon, and just like absolutely everything that my generation has done, they've turned it into a meme. The meme is called the Doomer. Presumably some of you aren't chronically online and aren't entirely familiar with the Doomer, and so I want to give you a definition as described by one of my favourite channels on YouTube, Pursuit of Wonder. The Doomer is an individual who's in their early 20s. He or she is someone who feels a sense of aimlessness or loneliness, and is consequently stricken with a deep despair for life. For the Doomer, life is meaningless, and the world is inevitably doomed by humanity's ignorance, greed, and futility. As a result, the Doomer sees little to no reason in engaging in traditional pursuit, and retreats from society into apathetic isolation. Now, if this description is
I've seen this happen to a lot of folks out there. It's sad, but don't be a doomer. Life can be good. You just have to make it good. And everyone has a bunch of excuses as to why they can't. But I think a lot of people can. A lot of people who complain can, and a lot of people who have those really hard challenges usually are too busy trying to fix their life and don't complain a whole lot. But that's just based off observation, purely anecdotal.
at all relatable to you as it was for me, then I want you to stick with me for the next few minutes, because understanding a little bit about
Dude, I'm
why this
sticking with
phenomenon
you.
is so prevalent nowadays
I'm here.
might give you a few tools in your arsenal to help you deal with these feelings.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
So, brief aside, there are a lot of people in the world right now who are materially affected by quite tragic circumstances. And I'm not
I don't
aiming
wanna
to
skip
invalidate
this. I feel
anyone
like a
who
bad
does feel
person.
that way. What I want to focus on is instead a sense of disillusionment, a feeling
the
of
old school Mac.
disconnection from the social environment that a lot of people feel right now. And I'd like you to keep that in mind when watching the rest of this. Okay, thanks. So, if I asked you, why has a generation in the face of these gigantic issues chosen to give up en masse? You might give a few different answers. Some of you might say something like this. Well, people these days just don't want to work for what they want. This generation has just decided to choose the easy way out instead of facing the struggles head on. To which I would say, well, why do we assume that giving up is the easy option? Let's try listening, and maybe we might reach a different conclusion entirely. I find it very difficult to say that doomerism is an easy way out, when it's not really a way out of anything. It doesn't relieve any particular individual of the stress and the trauma of human behaviour at large, and I don't think it necessarily frees you from anything. This angle, I feel, is most often brought forward by people from a different generation, who fundamentally had a different contract between them and society at large. People who lived a large part of their young adulthood through a time of optimism, a time where it seemed like hard work would actually genuinely be rewarded. What I think we see when we look at doomers is a group of people who feel one of two ways: misled or powerless. It's a group of people that is bombarded with messaging that tells them that their efforts are futile. They feel like the contract between society and them has been broken irreversibly, and thus there's nothing we can do but resign ourselves. And so I don't think it's fair to characterize doomerism as a choice necessarily, as a conscious decision to give up and choose ease of life, because it's not any easier than any other mode of life. Rather, it's a mindset that one develops after losing the so-called naive optimism you might have as a younger person. And some of you might agree with that. Some might even take the idea further and say something like this. Okay, so I get what you're saying. It sounds to me like doomerism and apathy are almost like a rational response. Why would anyone bother caring when facing these issues such as climate change and retirement? It seems to me like the sensible, rational thing to do is to give up, right? And at one point in my life, I would have agreed with this. But lucky for me, you're allowed to change your mind. I would even encourage it. See, I believe that most people in my age group are genuinely passionate about certain things. We do face this issue, however, that we are constantly told that our efforts are futile. And in such an environment, the overwhelmingly sensible thing to do seems to be not bother. But I don't necessarily think that that's an inherently rational way to respond. In fact, when it comes to human behaviour, rationality is the exception rather than the rule. And I think keeping that in mind is really important when it comes to challenging thought patterns that can be unhelpful to you. The idea of rationality in human decision making was kind of the motivation for this entire piece, specifically the work of Daniel Kahneman, a psychologist who specializes in that area. His most famous piece of work is probably the book Thinking Fast and Slow, and in it there's one specific idea that I wanted to share. I actually came across Thinking Fast and Slow in a book.
An incredibly well-researched video. This is a smart lad right here, and it's also incredibly intimate, so I feel bad pausing it to talk. I'm just like, just do your thing, I'll just talk in a second.
Shop recently, and it got me thinking about the subject of rationality. I'd read the book years ago, but thanks to today's sponsor, Shortform, I was able to get a really quick overview summary of all of the everything else we liked about and interested. If you two are 20% due to Shortform for sponsoring this piece. Let's get back to it.
I like how you call this
So
video
the specific
Pace.
idea that really resonated with me
Top class.
goes along the following line. When trying to answer the question, what do I think about X? You tend to think about the easier but misleading question. What do I remember about X? And how easily do I remember it? The more easily you remember something, the more significant you perceive it to be. When we're surrounded by information that's designed to make us feel powerless, then naturally we resign ourselves to feeling powerless. But there is another thing worth noting, and that's that time and time again, the people who have had the most impact, the people who've been heralded as leaders of movements, have been those who've behaved in a way that's inherently irrational. Their behaviour would only ever really make sense in retrospect. Now, I'm not saying that me or you is going to be able to solve huge systematic inequalities within our lifetimes. We have no ability to predict the impact of our behaviour throughout and beyond our lifespan. What we do have an ability to do, though, is to commit to values that we believe to be true, and to focus on seeing those values represented in people immediately around us. Whenever the kind of doomer mindset tries to come back to me, I do remember the fact that, for the most part, most people will not be remembered for their actions. But that does not mean that their actions do not have lasting consequences. I would, for example, challenge you to name more than, say, 10 people who are actively involved in the civil rights movement. And yet, it took the collective effort of millions of people to bring about change. And I think that's true for any issue that you care about. The people whose impact ends up affecting change are those who behave in a way that we would deem irrational. Because what humans would describe as rationality, I think, is more analogous to just talking about the status quo. We believe that whatever exists makes sense. I, for a long time, was a doomer, but I do think that things are starting to change. I'm starting to see the value of adding my voice to a collective, and accepting that it doesn't matter really whether or not that voice is actually heard. What matters is that I've made a concerted effort to make it heard within the people who are immediately around me. And that approach to life has made me a lot less fearful. Living by values that you believe to be true is the only power I think we have. And no matter how rough or how bad things feel like they're going to be, it's a power that you'll always have. So why not try and use it?
All right. Thank you, Feds. That was a very well-researched video. What is this?
I want to tell you a slightly unpleasant story.
I don't have
early
time.
2020,
I'm sorry.
So I went on Reddit the other day,
sorry.
and I saw a thread that was quite interesting.
I'm sorry. I don't have time to watch another video, but that was cool. I don't have as well said or sweet thought as he did, which what he said was really cool, and about engaging in a collective is something that I definitely believe in. And I think that people in Gen Z are starting to realize that it's going to be up to us to make a lot of important political decisions and economic decisions and, all sorts of different things in between. But I would also say doomerism or any form of limiting pessimism. It's good to sometimes be pessimistic and think about outcomes that aren't going to be the best, but when it limits you, like when your pessimism limits what you think you're capable of and things like that, I think that's a huge problem. And I think that a lot of doomerism sometimes is like limiting. It's like, why even try? And I think that's antithetical to the human experience, because that's like kind of what we do. Yeah. Well, I don't have time to watch another video or really do much else, so I guess that'll be it for this one.